Why do you look at me like I remind you of something you're trying to forget? The question came at 9 p.m. in an empty office, and Logan Reed's entire body went cold. For 6 months, he'd avoided Ava Stone, his new CEO, his boss, the woman whose brother died on his watch 5 years ago. He thought he'd been careful, subtle, but she'd seen through every deflection, every excuse, every late-night escape route. Now she stood between him and the door, and there was nowhere left to run. What happened next would either destroy him or force him to face the truth he'd been hiding since the night everything fell apart. Drop a like and comment your city so I know how far this story reaches. Logan Reed had always believed that survival meant staying invisible. At 32, he'd perfected the art. Show up early, leave late, keep your head down, do the work, go home to your kid, repeat. No drama, no mistakes, no one looking too closely at the cracks beneath the surface. It was a decent life, a quiet one. And for someone raising a 7-year-old daughter alone, quiet was the closest thing to safety he could manage. Until Ava Stone walked into Fortis Engineering 6 months ago and blew that safety to pieces. She wasn't loud about it. That was the worst part. She didn't storm in with demands or speeches or a clipboard full of changes. She just appeared. New CEO, 30 years old, Stanford MBA, family money, and a last name that made Logan's stomach drop the first time he heard it. Stone. He'd spent the first week convincing himself it was a coincidence. Common name. No connection. She couldn't possibly be related to that Stone, the one whose face Logan still saw in his worst moments, the one whose death had lived in his chest like a stone of its own for 5 years. But then he saw the photo on her desk during a morning briefing. A young man with dark hair and a wide smile, arms slung over Ava's shoulder. The same smile Logan remembered from safety meetings and late-night project calls. The same face that had been in the obituary he'd read alone in a coffee shop, hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold the newspaper straight. Evan Stone, her brother, and Logan had been the one who killed him. Not with his hands, not directly, but close enough that the guilt lived in his bones, that it woke him up at 3 a.m. when the house was silent and his daughter was asleep, and there was no noise loud enough to drown out the memory of that phone call. There's been an accident. Evan didn't make it. I'm so sorry. So Logan did what he'd learned to do best. He avoided. If Ava scheduled a one-on-one, he rescheduled. If she asked him to present at a meeting, he delegated. If she walked into the break room, he found an urgent reason to be somewhere else. It wasn't smooth, it wasn't professional, but it was necessary because the alternative, standing in front of her, looking into eyes that might carry the same grief he did, was unthinkable. His coworkers noticed. "Dude, what's your problem with the new boss?" Marcus had asked one afternoon, leaning against Logan's cubicle with a coffee in hand. Marcus was one of the few people at Fortis who knew Logan beyond the work. They'd started the same year, survived the same brutal project cycles, attended the same memorial service 5 years ago. "No problem," Logan said, eyes locked on his monitor. "You literally walked out of the quarterly review when she asked you a direct question. I had to pick up Riley. At 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday." Logan's jaw tightened. Daycare called. Marcus gave him a long look, the kind that said, "I know you're lying, but I'm not going to push it." "Just saying, people talk, and she's not stupid." That was the problem. Ava Stone was far from stupid. She was sharp, precise, and uncomfortably perceptive. In 6 months, she'd overhauled half the company's outdated policies, renegotiated vendor contracts, and somehow managed to do it without making enemies. People respected her, liked her even. She didn't micromanage, didn't play politics, just worked, asked smart questions, and actually listened to the answers. Logan hated that he noticed. He hated that every time she spoke in a meeting, he found himself listening despite his best efforts. Hated that her voice was calm and clear and nothing like what he'd imagined. Hated that she looked tired sometimes, in the way people do when they carry weight no one else can see. And he hated more than anything that she reminded him of Evan. Not in appearance. Evan had been broad-shouldered and loud, the kind of guy who filled a room just by walking into it. Ava was smaller, quieter, sharper, but there was something in the way she moved through the office, the way she held herself like she was used to being underestimated and had stopped caring. Evan had been like that too. The worst part was the small moments, the ones Logan couldn't predict or avoid. Like the Tuesday morning, she'd stopped by his desk with a question about a client proposal, and he'd frozen mid-sentence because she tilted her head the exact same way Evan used to when he was thinking through a problem. Or the Friday afternoon meeting where she'd laughed, really laughed, not the polite corporate kind, and the sound had hit Logan like a fist to the gut because it carried the same unguarded joy Evans had. Those moments were the ones that kept Logan up at night, staring at his ceiling while Riley slept down the hall, wondering if he'd ever stop seeing ghosts. By month 4, Logan's avoidance had become a routine. He knew her schedule, knew which meetings she'd attend, which floors she'd visit, which times of day she'd be locked in her office. He planned his days around hers like a game of chess, where the goal was never to be in the same room. It worked. Until it didn't. The cracks started showing in small ways. There was the project review where Logan had delegated his presentation to Marcus for the 3rd time, and he'd caught Ava watching him from across the conference room with an expression he couldn't read. There was the company-wide email about updated safety protocols, policies that looked suspiciously similar to the ones Logan had drafted 5 years ago and watched get buried in bureaucracy. And he'd wondered if she knew, if she'd found those old proposals in some archived file. There was the morning she'd walked past his cubicle and paused, just for a second, like she wanted to say something. Logan had kept his eyes on his screen, fingers frozen over his keyboard, barely breathing until he heard her footsteps continue down the hall. He was losing ground. He knew it, but he didn't know how to stop. The thing was, Logan had gotten good at compartmentalizing. Work was work. Home was home. The past was a locked box he only opened in the dark. Alone. When there was no one around to see him fall apart, Riley was his anchor. Had been since the day she was born, red-faced and screaming, and the nurse had placed her in his arms while his ex-wife signed the papers that would make their separation official before their daughter was even a week old. He'd been 25, terrified, and completely unprepared. But he'd figured it out. Single dad wasn't a role he'd planned for, but it was the one he'd gotten, and he'd learned to make it work. Breakfast before school. Packed lunches with the crusts cut off because Riley insisted sandwiches tasted better that way. Homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories about dinosaurs and astronauts, parent-teacher conferences where he was usually the only father in a sea of mothers. It was a good life. A simple one. And Logan had convinced himself that was enough. But then Evan had died, and something in Logan had broken in a way he couldn't fix. The guilt had seeped into everything. His work, his sleep, his ability to look at himself in the mirror without seeing a killer staring back. He'd started therapy for a while, sat in an office with beige walls, and talked to a woman with kind eyes about survivor's guilt and accountability and forgiveness. It hadn't helped, because the truth was, Logan didn't want forgiveness. He wanted to go back, wanted to tell his younger self to say no, to push back harder, to put his foot down, and refuse to sign off on a schedule that put profit over people. But he couldn't. So he'd done the next best thing. He'd made himself small, kept his head down, worked hard enough to be valuable but not visible, raised his daughter and pretended the rest of the world didn't exist. And it had worked. Until Ava. The day everything changed started normal enough. Logan woke up at 6, got Riley ready for school, dropped her off with a kiss on the forehead and a reminder that he'd pick her up after art class. He grabbed coffee from the shop on the corner, black, no sugar, because he'd given up on things tasting good a long time ago, and made it to the office by 7:30. The building was mostly empty at that hour. Logan liked it that way, liked the quiet hum of the HVAC system, the way his footsteps echoed in the stairwell, the sense that he had the place to himself for just a little while. He settled into his cubicle, pulled up his project files, and lost himself in work. By 8, the office started filling up. Voices in the hallways, the smell of burnt coffee from the break room, the steady click of keyboards, and the occasional burst of laughter from the sales team on the other side of the floor. Logan kept his head down. The morning passed in a blur of emails and spreadsheets. At noon, Marcus stopped by with takeout. "You eat yet?" Logan glanced up. "I'm good." That's not an answer. Marcus dropped a container of pad thai on Logan's desk. "Eat. You look like hell." "Thanks." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" Logan shrugged. "Riley had a nightmare. We were up late." It wasn't a lie. Riley had woken up around 2, crying about monsters under her bed. Logan had spent an hour sitting on her floor, holding her hand until she fell back asleep. But that wasn't why he looked tired. Marcus pulled up a chair. You still avoiding the boss? I'm not avoiding anyone. Right. That's why you've rescheduled your check-in with her 4 times. I've been busy. Logan, Marcus's voice dropped. I know this is hard, but you can't keep doing this. Doing what? Running. Whatever happened with Evan? Don't. Logan's voice came out sharper than he intended. Just don't. Marcus held up his hands. Okay, just think about it. She's not going anywhere, and neither are you. So at some point, you're going to have to deal with it. Logan didn't respond, just stared at his screen until Marcus sighed and left. The afternoon dragged on. Logan sat through 2 meetings, contributed the bare minimum, and counted down the hours until he could leave. By 5, the office started emptying out. By 6, most people were gone. Logan stayed. He always stayed late on Thursdays. Riley had art class until 7, which gave him an extra couple of hours to catch up on work without distractions. It was one of the few times during the week he didn't feel like he was constantly behind. By 8, the building was nearly silent. Logan stretched in his chair, rubbed his eyes, and tried to focus on the timeline in front of him. The project was due in 2 weeks, and they were already behind schedule. Nothing new. Fortis was always behind schedule. But this one mattered. Big client, big contract, the kind of thing that could make or break the quarter. He was so focused on the numbers that he didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped right behind him. Logan, he flinched, hard enough that his knee slammed into the underside of his desk. Pain shot up his leg, but he barely felt it because his entire body had gone cold. He turned slowly. Ava Stone stood 3 feet away, arms crossed, wearing a navy blazer and jeans. Her expression was calm, unreadable. Miss Stone? Logan's voice sounded strangled even to his own ears. I didn't know you were still here. I could say the same about you. Just catching up on some work? At 8 o'clock on a Thursday. Yeah. She didn't move, didn't blink, just looked at him with those dark, steady eyes, and Logan felt like every defense he'd built over the past 6 months was crumbling under the weight of her gaze. You've been avoiding me, she said. Not a question, a statement. Logan's throat tightened. I've been busy. For 6 months? It's been a busy 6 months. Logan. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. I'm not stupid, and I'm not blind. So let's skip the part where you lie to me and get to the part where you tell me what's actually going on. His heart was pounding. He could feel sweat starting to bead at his hairline. He stood up because sitting made him feel trapped, but standing didn't help. She was still too close, still too calm. I need to go, he said. Riley is at art class until 7:30, Ava finished. I know, you leave every Thursday at 7:15 to pick her up. You're early. Logan stared at her. I'm not trying to be creepy, she continued, voice even. I'm trying to understand why my lead project manager has been treating me like I'm contagious. I haven't. You've rescheduled 4 one-on-ones, sent Marcus to present your own work twice, left a board meeting in the middle of my question, and every time I walk into a room, you find an excuse to leave. She tilted her head slightly. So either I did something to offend you, or there's something else going on. Which is it? Logan's hands curled into fists at his sides. He could feel his pulse in his throat, could feel the edges of panic creeping in like a rising tide. It's not personal, he managed. Then what is it? I just think it's better if I keep my distance. Why? The word hung in the air between them, sharp and unavoidable. Logan's mind raced. He could lie, make up some excuse about professional boundaries or personality differences. She might even believe it, might let him walk away. But she was still looking at him, and there was something in her expression now, something that wasn't anger or confusion, but something quieter, something that looked almost like recognition. And Logan was so tired of running. Why do you look at me like I remind you of something you're trying to forget? Ava asked softly. The breath went out of Logan's lungs. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a printer beeped. Logan's mind scrambled for an exit, a deflection, anything that would let him walk away from this conversation with his carefully constructed walls still intact. But the walls were already crumbling. and he was too exhausted to hold them up anymore. "Evan," he said. The name tasted like rust in his mouth. "You remind me of Evan." Ava went very still. "I knew him," Logan continued, voice barely above a whisper. "We worked together, same team, same projects." He forced himself to meet her eyes. "I was his manager." Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or something harder to name. "You were there?" "Yeah, when he died." "Not physically," Logan's voice cracked, "but I was the one who approved the schedule, the one who signed off on the overtime. I was the one who put him in that position." Ava didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him. And Logan couldn't stop now. 5 years of guilt was pouring out, and he had no idea how to hold it back. "We were under pressure," he said. "Massive deadline. Client threatening to walk. Everyone was stretched thin, but Evan—" Logan's throat tightened. Evan was reliable. He never said no, never complained, and I took advantage of that. The words came faster now, tumbling over each other. "There was this project, high stakes, terrible timeline, and we were hemorrhaging people because the hours were insane. I went to upper management, told them we needed more staff, better scheduling, something to keep people from burning out. They said no, said we had to make it work with what we had." Logan's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets. "So I did what I was told. I made it work. And that meant asking people to pull double shifts, to work weekends, to push themselves past what was safe or reasonable. Evan volunteered for the overnight shift, said he didn't mind, said he could handle it." Logan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I let him. I was so focused on hitting the deadline that I didn't stop to think about what I was asking, what it would cost." He looked at Ava, and her expression was unreadable. "He fell asleep at the wheel," Logan said. 3 a.m, driving home after a 16-hour shift. Crashed into a concrete barrier on Route 95. They said it was instant, that he didn't suffer." His voice broke. "But I put him in that car. I made the call that sent him home exhausted, and I've been carrying that every single day since." The silence that followed was deafening. Logan waited for the anger, the accusations, the moment she'd tell him to get out, to pack his things, to never show his face here again. Instead, Ava took a slow, measured breath. "I know," she said. Logan blinked. "What?" "I know who you are. I've known since before I took this job." The floor tilted beneath him. "You what?" "I did my research," Ava said, voice steady. "I read every report, every email, every witness statement from that night. I know you were his manager. I know you approved the schedule. I know you were the one who called my parents at 4 a.m. to tell them their son was dead." Logan felt like he was drowning. "Then why—" His voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you say anything?" For the first time, something cracked in Ava's composure. Just a flicker, but enough. "Because I wanted to see if you'd run," she said quietly. "What?" "I wanted to see if you'd face me, if you'd own what happened, or if you'd do exactly what you've been doing, hiding, avoiding, pretending I didn't exist." She looked away. "I needed to know what kind of man you were." Logan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "And now I know," Ava said. "You must hate me." "I don't." "You should." "You? Maybe." She looked back at him, and there was something raw in her eyes now, something that cut deeper than anger. "But hate's exhausting, and I've been carrying my own weight for 5 years. Logan stared at her, lost. "I didn't come here to punish you," Ava continued. "I came here because this company meant something to Evan. Because the work you were trying to do, the safety initiatives you tried to push through before he died, mattered to him. And when I saw your name in those files, saw what you'd been fighting for, I realized something." Logan's heart hammered against his ribs. "You weren't the villain," Ava said. "You were just another person trying to survive a system that didn't care about anything except the bottom line." "I signed off on it," Logan said desperately. "I made the call. And I told him to take the shift." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Logan froze. "What?" Ava's jaw tightened, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Evan called me that night," she said, "around midnight. He was exhausted, said he wasn't sure he should drive home, that maybe he should just sleep in his car in the parking lot until morning." Her voice wavered. "And I told him not to be ridiculous, told him to push through, that he was almost done, that it was just one more night, that it would all be worth it when the project was finished. She looked at Logan, and her eyes were bright now, sharp with tears she wouldn't let fall. "So if you want to blame someone," she said, "get in line, because I've been doing that for 5 years too." The air between them was thick with grief, with guilt that had nowhere left to go. "I told him to drive home," Ava whispered. "I was his big sister. He trusted me. And I told him to get behind the wheel when he was too tired to see straight." Logan's chest ached. "We've both been punishing ourselves," Ava said, "for the same thing. Alone." "I don't know how to stop," Logan admitted. "Neither do I." Her voice was barely audible now. "But I'm tired of carrying it by myself. Aren't you?" Logan nodded because he couldn't trust his voice. For a long moment, they just stood there in the empty office. Two people bound by loss, by mistakes, by the weight of a single night that had shaped everything that came after. Finally, Ava took a step back. She wiped her eyes quickly, like she was angry at herself for showing weakness. "I'm not asking you to forgive yourself," she said. "I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I am asking you to stop running. From me. From this." She gestured between them. "Because I think we're the only two people in the world who understand what this actually cost." Logan's throat was tight. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to stay," Ava said. "I want you to show up, to stop hiding, and I want us to figure out how to turn what happened into something that actually matters." She met his eyes. "Evan deserves that much. Don't you think?" The words settled over Logan, not light, but solid, real. "Yeah," he said roughly. "He does." Ava nodded once. "Good. Then I'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. And Logan?" He looked at her. "Don't reschedule." She turned and walked toward the elevator, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Logan watched her go, his chest tight, his hands still shaking. When the elevator doors closed, he sank back into his chair and dropped his head into his hands. For the first time in 5 years, Logan let himself cry. Not because the guilt was gone. It wasn't. It probably never would be. But because for the first time, he wasn't carrying it alone. And that made all the difference. Hush. Word count. Approximately 4,200 words I need to continue expanding to reach 6,500 to 7,000 words. Let me add more depth to the story. So, when Logan finally pulled himself together, it was almost 9. He'd missed Riley's pickup time by nearly an hour. Panic shot through him as he grabbed his phone. 3 missed calls from the art studio. 2 voicemails. He was already dialing back as he ran for the elevator, his heart hammering with a different kind of guilt now. "Logan?" The voice on the other end was patient. Mrs. Chen had been Riley's art teacher for 2 years. She'd seen him late before. "She's fine. We're just finishing up cleanup, but you might want to hurry." "I'm so sorry. I'm on my way. 10 minutes. "Take your time. She's drawing." The drive across town felt endless. Logan gripped the steering wheel too tight, his knuckles white, his mind still spinning from the conversation with Ava. Every word she'd said played on repeat. "I know who you are. I've known since before I took this job." She'd known. The entire time she'd known. And she'd been watching him run. The art studio was in a renovated warehouse in the arts district, all exposed brick and large windows. Logan parked haphazardly and jogged inside. The main room was empty except for Mrs. Chen cleaning paintbrushes at the sink and Riley sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by sheets of paper covered in crayon drawings. "Daddy!" Riley looked up, her face lighting up. No anger, no frustration, just pure 7-year-old joy at seeing him. Logan's chest constricted. "Hey, Bug?" He crouched down beside her. "I'm sorry I'm late." "It's okay. I made you a picture." She held up a drawing of what appeared to be a purple dinosaur standing next to a very tall building. "That's you at work, and that's a stegosaurus because they're my favorite." "It's perfect," Logan said, and meant it. Mrs. Chen walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. "She did great today, very focused. Thanks for staying late. I really am sorry." "Don't worry about it," Mrs. Chen smiled. "These things happen." But they shouldn't, Logan thought as he gathered Riley's backpack and art supplies. Not with him. He'd built his entire life around being reliable, being present, being the one person Riley could count on no matter what. And tonight he'd led a conversation with his boss with the sister of a man he'd killed, throw him so completely off balance that he'd forgotten his own daughter. In the car, Riley chattered about her day, something about a boy named Mason who ate paste, something about a new dinosaur book the school library got. Logan made the appropriate sounds, nodded in the right places, but his mind was elsewhere. I told him to take the shift. Ava's voice echoed in his head. The crack in her composure when she'd admitted her own guilt. The way her hands had shaken just slightly before she'd clenched them into fists. She'd been carrying the same weight he had, for just as long. They pulled into the driveway of the small house Logan rented in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was too small, and a backyard that was mostly weeds. But it was theirs, safe, stable. Inside, Logan made dinner while Riley spread her homework across the kitchen table. Mac and cheese from a box. Carrot sticks because he was at least trying to pretend they ate vegetables. A glass of milk that Riley immediately protested she was too old for. "You're 7, Logan said. "Drink the milk." "Mason doesn't have to drink milk." "Mason eats paste," Riley giggled. Fair point. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of just the two of them. After dinner, Logan supervised teeth brushing, read 3 chapters of a book about a girl who discovered she was secretly a dragon, and tucked Riley into bed with her favorite stuffed triceratops. "Daddy?" Riley's voice was sleepy. "Are you okay?" Logan paused in the doorway. "Yeah, Bug." "Why?" "You seem sad." Kids were too perceptive. Logan had learned that early on. You couldn't hide from them. Couldn't fake it the way you could with adults. "Just a long day," he said honestly. "But I'm okay." "Promise?" "Promise." Riley nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Logan watched her for a moment longer, this small person who trusted him completely, who had no idea how badly he'd failed someone else's brother, someone else's son. He couldn't fail her too. Back in the kitchen, Logan cleaned up dinner, loaded the dishwasher, wiped down the counters. Routine. Normal. The kind of mindless tasks that usually calmed him. Tonight they didn't help. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, intending to finish the project timeline he'd been working on. Instead, he found himself opening old files. Emails from 5 years ago. Project schedules. The safety proposal he'd drafted and submitted 3 times before Evan died. Each time with more urgency, each time getting buried by budget concerns and timeline pressures. He'd tried. He'd really tried. But it hadn't been enough. Logan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Ava. Don't reschedule tomorrow. I mean it." He stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "I won't." Her response came immediately. "Good. Get some sleep." Logan almost laughed. Sleep. Like that was something he knew how to do anymore. But he shut his laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed anyway. Lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him, thinking about a woman who'd spent 6 months watching him run and had finally decided to stop letting him. Tomorrow, he'd go to her office. Tomorrow, he'd face whatever came next. Tonight, he just let himself feel the weight of it all, the grief, the guilt, the strange, unexpected relief of knowing he wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere in the early hours of the morning, exhaustion finally pulled him under. Logan woke up to Riley jumping on his bed at 6:30, which was both too early and exactly on schedule. "Daddy, you're going to be late," she announced, bouncing hard enough that his spine protested. "You always wake me up at 6:30. Now it's 6:30 and you're still sleeping." Logan groaned and pulled a pillow over his face. 5 more minutes. "That's what I say and you never let me." She had a point. He dragged himself out of bed, made breakfast on autopilot, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, and got Riley ready for school. The morning routine was so ingrained in his muscle memory that he didn't have to think about it, which was good because his brain was already stuck on the 9 a.m. meeting with Ava. Don't reschedule. He wouldn't, couldn't, even if he wanted to. Something had shifted last night. Some wall he'd spent 5 years building had finally cracked wide enough that there was no patching it back together. After dropping Riley off, Logan sat in his car in the school parking lot for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Other parents streamed past, chatting and laughing, living lives that looked so much simpler than his felt. He wanted to drive away, wanted to call in sick, pack Riley up after school, and just disappear for a while. Instead, he started the car and headed to Fortis. The office was already buzzing when he arrived at 8:15. Logan kept his head down, went straight to his desk, and tried to focus on work. Failed completely. By 8:45, he'd read the same email 3 times without absorbing a single word. At 8:50, his phone buzzed. "My office is on the 4th floor. Don't make me come find you." Logan almost smiled despite himself. Ava Stone didn't waste words. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, buying himself an extra minute. The 4th floor was executive territory. Bigger offices, better furniture, fewer people. Logan had only been up here a handful of times, usually for presentations to the board or meetings he couldn't delegate his way out of. Ava's office was at the end of the hall, corner view, glass walls that she'd covered with partially drawn blinds. Logan could see her through the gaps, sitting at her desk, reading something on her laptop with the kind of focus that made the rest of the world disappear. He knocked. She looked up immediately. "Come in." Logan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The office was surprisingly sparse: desk, chairs, bookshelf, and that photo of Evan on the corner of her desk. No corporate motivational posters, no awards on the walls, just a space that felt temporary, like she hadn't decided yet if she was staying. "Sit," Ava said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Logan sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ava studied him with the same steady gaze from last night, and Logan resisted the urge to look away. "How'd you sleep?" she asked finally. "Not great. You?" "Same." Another pause. Logan's hands were sweating. He wiped them on his jeans. "I've been thinking," Ava said, leaning back in her chair, "about what happens next." "Okay." "I don't want your resignation." Logan blinked. "I wasn't planning to—" "Yes, you were." Her voice was matter-of-fact. "You were planning to walk in here, apologize again, and tell me it would be easier for everyone if you left. Because that's what you do. You run." She wasn't wrong. "But here's the thing," Ava continued. "You're good at your job. Really good. The projects you manage come in on time, under budget, and your team actually likes working for you. That's rare. And I need people like you." Logan didn't know what to say to that. "More than that," Ava said, her voice softening slightly, "I think we can help each other. I've spent 5 years blaming myself for Evan's death. You've spent 5 years doing the same, and neither of us has moved forward because we've been too busy drowning in guilt." "I don't see how that changes," Logan said quietly. "It changes because we stop doing it alone." Ava pulled a folder from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. "I found these in the archives. Your safety proposals, the ones you submitted before Evan died." Logan's stomach dropped. He didn't need to open the folder to know what was inside. He'd written those proposals in a fever of desperation, staying up late after Riley went to bed, trying to find a way to protect his team from the grinding hours that were slowly destroying them. All 3 had been rejected. "They were good," Ava said. "Better than good. If the company had implemented even half of what you suggested, Evan would still be alive." The words hit like a physical blow. "But they didn't," Logan managed. "I wrote them, I fought for them, and they still said no. And I still approved the schedule anyway because I was too much of a coward to walk away. You had a daughter to support, a mortgage, bills. You weren't a coward. You were trapped in the same system that killed my brother." Ava's jaw tightened. "And that system is still here, still grinding people down, still putting profit over safety." Logan looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to change it, and I want your help." The proposal Ava laid out over the next hour was ambitious, bordering on reckless. She wanted to overhaul Fortis's entire approach to project management. Hard caps on weekly hours, mandatory rest periods between shifts, rotating schedules to prevent burnout, anonymous reporting systems for safety concerns. Everything Logan had asked for 5 years ago and more. "The board will never approve it," Logan said when she finished. "It'll cost too much. Slow down production. They'll say we can't compete with other firms if we're babying our employees." "Let me worry about the board." "Ava, they'll fire you." "Maybe," she shrugged. "But I didn't take this job to play it safe. I took it because I wanted to make sure what happened to Evan never happens to anyone else. And I can't do that without someone who understands the problem from the inside." Logan stared at her. "You really think we can pull this off?" "I think we have to try." There was something in her voice, not quite hope, but determination. The kind that came from grief channeled into purpose. Logan recognized it because he'd been searching for that same thing for 5 years and coming up empty. "Okay," he said, "I'm in." Ava nodded, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Small, genuine, there and gone in a second. But it was enough. "Good. Then let's get to work." The next 2 weeks were brutal. Logan threw himself into the project with an intensity that surprised even him. He and Ava met almost daily, sometimes in her office, sometimes in conference rooms, once in a coffee shop downtown when the office felt too suffocating. They dug through years of project data, injury reports, turnover rates, built spreadsheets and projections and presentations meant to convince skeptical executives that treating people like humans was actually good business. It was exhausting and strange, and the first time in 5 years Logan felt like he was doing something that mattered. The rest of the office noticed. "So you're not avoiding the boss anymore," Marcus observed one afternoon, dropping into the chair next to Logan's desk with his perpetual cup of coffee. "Nope." "What changed?" Logan kept his eyes on his screen. "We talked." "That's it? You talked?" "Yeah." Marcus waited, clearly expecting more. When Logan didn't elaborate, he sighed. "You're the worst gossip in this entire building." "I'm not a gossip at all." "Exactly. It's a problem." Despite himself, Logan smiled. But the work wasn't just spreadsheets and meetings. It was also facing the parts of the past Logan had buried. Ava insisted they document everything, not just the statistics, but the human cost. That meant tracking down people who'd worked under the old system, people who'd burned out or left, or worse. It meant talking to Evan's old teammates. Logan had avoided them for 5 years. Some had left the company, some had transferred to different departments. But a few were still around, still working the same grinding schedules, still pushing through the same impossible demands. The first one Logan approached was Sarah Chen, a software engineer who'd been on Evan's team and was now leading her own projects. She was in the break room when Logan found her, eating a sad desk salad and scrolling through her phone. "Sarah, got a minute?" She looked up, surprised. "Logan? Hey." "Yeah, sure." They found an empty conference room. Logan closed the door and immediately felt like he was about to jump off a cliff. "I wanted to ask you about something," he started, "about the Titan project, 5 years ago." Sarah's expression shifted. "What about it? You were there. You worked those same hours Evan did." Logan swallowed hard. "I'm putting together a proposal to change how we schedule projects. Make sure what happened to him doesn't happen again, and I need to understand what it was actually like. From someone who lived through it." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her fork. "It was hell," she said simply. "We were working 70, 80-hour weeks for months. People were falling asleep at their desks, making stupid mistakes because we were too tired to think straight. I remember one guy, Ben, I think his name was. He fell asleep standing up in the bathroom, just completely passed out." Logan felt sick. "We kept saying something had to give," Sarah continued, "that someone was going to get hurt. But the deadlines kept coming, and the client kept demanding more, and management kept saying, just a little longer, just push through, we're almost done." She looked at Logan directly. "Evan was a good guy. He wanted to help, wanted to prove himself. And the company used that until there was nothing left." "I'm sorry," Logan said. "I should have fought harder. Should have done more." "You did fight," Sarah interrupted. "I saw the emails, the proposals you sent up the chain. You tried to protect us, but you were one person up against a whole system that didn't care." She paused. "We didn't blame you, Logan. We blamed the people who could have changed things and chose not to." The words settled over him, heavy and strange. Forgiveness he hadn't asked for. Understanding he didn't think he deserved. "Thank you," he managed. Sarah nodded. "Whatever you're trying to do now, I hope it works. Because nothing's really changed. We're still drowning. We're just better at hiding it." Logan talked to 6 more people over the next week. Got 6 variations of the same story. Too many hours, too much pressure, too little support. People who loved their work but hated what it was doing to them. People who'd left friends and family behind because the job demanded everything and gave back nothing but a paycheck and the promise that things would get better next quarter. They never did. Each conversation left Logan raw, but they also gave him something he hadn't expected. Evidence. Real stories from real people that couldn't be dismissed as whining or weakness. This wasn't about a few bad employees. It was about a culture that treated burnout as the cost of doing business. He compiled everything into a document that ran 43 pages. Statistics, testimonials, cost-benefit analyses, implementation timelines. It was the most comprehensive thing Logan had ever written. And when he finally handed it to Ava, his hands were shaking. She read it in one sitting while Logan paced her office, too anxious to sit down. When she finished, she looked up. "This is good. Really good." "Yeah?" "Yeah. But you know what happens now, right?" Logan nodded. "We present it to the board, and they're going to fight us on every single point." "I know." Ava closed the folder and stood. "Then let's make sure we're ready." The board meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Logan spent the entire week before it rehearsing, revising, trying to anticipate every possible objection. Ava was relentless, pushing him to be clearer, sharper, more direct. No hedging, no apologizing, no corporate speak that obscured the truth. "They're going to try to dismiss this as idealistic," she said during one practice session. "They're going to say it's too expensive, too complicated, too risky. And you need to be ready to call that what it is, an excuse to keep exploiting people." "That's not exactly diplomatic," Logan pointed out. "Good. I'm tired of diplomacy." By Thursday night, Logan felt as ready as he was ever going to be. He picked Riley up from school, made dinner, helped with homework, and tried to act like everything was normal. But Riley knew him too well. "You're nervous," she said at bedtime. "A little." "About what?" Logan hesitated. He'd never told Riley about Evan, hadn't known how to explain that sometimes people died because other people made bad choices, and that her dad was one of those people. She was 7. She shouldn't have to carry that weight, but she was also smart, and she deserved something closer to the truth. "I'm trying to fix something at work," he said carefully. "Something I should have fixed a long time ago, and I'm worried I'll mess it up." Riley considered this. "But you're trying now, right?" "Yeah." "Then that's what matters." Logan kissed her forehead. "When'd you get so wise?" "I'm 7. I've learned a lot." Friday morning arrived too fast. Logan put on his best suit, the one he saved for client presentations and funerals, and drove to the office with his stomach in knots. Ava met him outside the boardroom at 2 o'clock. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. Me neither." She straightened his tie. "Just remember, we're not asking permission. We're telling them what's going to change." The boardroom was all dark wood and leather chairs built to intimidate. 8 executives sat around the table, most of them men in their 50s and 60s who'd been with the company since before Logan was born. They looked at him the way you'd look at an inconvenient insect. Ava took the head of the table. Logan stood beside the projector, remote in hand, trying not to sweat through his shirt. "Thank you for making time," Ava began. "We're here to discuss implementation of a new workplace safety and wellness initiative. Logan Reed, our lead project manager, has put together a comprehensive proposal." "Logan?" He clicked to the first slide, and then he started talking. He walked them through the data, injury rates, turnover costs, productivity losses from burnout, showed them the testimonials from employees who'd left or were considering it, explained the proposed changes and the projected costs, anticipated their objections and countered them before they could voice them. Halfway through, Richard Dawson, CFO, old guard, the kind of man who thought people were interchangeable parts, interrupted. "This is all very nice, Mr. Reed, but the bottom line is we're a business, not a charity. Our competitors aren't coddling their employees. If we implement these restrictions, we'll lose contracts to firms that can move faster and deliver cheaper." Logan had expected this, had practiced his response a dozen times, but what came out wasn't rehearsed. 5 years ago, Logan said, a man named Evan Stone died driving home from one of our projects. He was 26. He'd worked a 16-hour shift because we told him we needed him to, because hitting a deadline was more important than his safety. And when he crashed his car into a concrete barrier at 3 in the morning, we sent flowers to the funeral and moved on. The room went silent. "I approved that schedule," Logan continued, his voice steady now. "I signed off on it because I was trying to save the project, and I've spent 5 years wishing I'd had the guts to say no, to tell you that what you were asking wasn't sustainable, that people matter more than deadlines." He looked directly at Dawson. "So yes, we're a business, But we're a business that's built on human beings who have families and lives and limits. And if we keep treating them like machines, we're going to keep losing good people. Some of them to other jobs. Some of them to burnout. And some of them, his voice caught, some of them will lose permanently. Is that really the legacy you want? No one spoke. Ava stood. The proposal is comprehensive and financially sound. Implementation begins next quarter with or without your approval. But I'd rather do this together than make it a fight. She looked around the table. Anyone have questions? Richard Dawson leaned back in his chair, studying Logan with an expression somewhere between annoyance and grudging respect. One question, he said. How do we know this won't happen again? How do we guarantee that employees won't abuse these protections? Call in tired when they're not. Use this as an excuse to slack off. Logan felt anger flash hot in his chest, but before he could respond, Ava cut in. We don't, she said flatly. Just like we can't guarantee employees won't steal office supplies or fake sick days now, but in 15 years with this company, I've watched hundreds of people work themselves to exhaustion because they cared about doing good work. The problem isn't that people want to slack off. The problem is we've built a culture where asking for help feels like failure. She paused, letting that sink in. So we're going to trust our people. And if someone abuses that trust, we'll deal with it the way we deal with any other misconduct. But we're not going to keep sacrificing good employees because we're afraid of a few bad actors. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Patricia Vance, head of operations, spoke up. I'd like to see a phased rollout. Start with one department, measure results, scale if it works. That's reasonable, Ava said. And quarterly reviews, added someone else. Make sure this doesn't tank productivity. Already in the proposal. One by one, the executives weighed in. Some skeptical, some cautiously supportive, none outright opposed. By the time the meeting ended an hour later, Logan's shirt was soaked with sweat and his hands wouldn't stop shaking, but they'd done it. The proposal passed. Outside the boardroom, Logan leaned against the wall and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Ava stood beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. That was, Logan started. Terrifying? Yeah. Good. If it wasn't scary, it wouldn't matter. She looked at him. You did well in there. I almost lost it when Dawson started talking about people abusing the system. But you didn't. You told the truth instead. Ava pushed off the wall. Come on, I'm buying you a drink. But they ended up at a bar 2 blocks from the office, the kind of place that catered to the after-work crowd with overpriced cocktails and dim lighting. Ava ordered whiskey neat. Logan got a beer he didn't really want, but needed something to do with his hands. To not failing completely, Ava said, raising her glass. Logan clinked his bottle against it. I'll drink to that. They sat in silence for a while, the adrenaline from the meeting slowly draining away. The bar was filling up around them, people laughing, complaining about their bosses, living normal lives that didn't involve confronting boards of directors about dead brothers. Can I ask you something? Logan said finally. Sure. Why'd you really come to Fortis? You could have gone anywhere, done anything. Why come here and dig up all this pain? Ava swirled her whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Because I was tired of running, she said quietly. After Evan died, I threw myself into work, got my MBA, took a job in consulting, moved across the country, told myself I was moving forward, but really I was just running away from the fact that my little brother was gone and I'd never said goodbye. She took a sip. Eventually I realized I had 2 choices. I could keep running for the rest of my life, or I could turn around and face it, try to make something good come from something awful. She looked at Logan. So here I am. That's brave, Logan said. It's terrifying. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Ava smiled slightly. No, I guess they're not. They talked until the bar got too loud and Logan needed to get home to Riley. Outside, the evening air was cool, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. Thank you, Logan said, for today, for all of this. Don't thank me yet. We've still got implementation to deal with, and I guarantee Dawson's going to make our lives difficult every step of the way. Looking forward to it. Ava laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. You're weird, Logan Reed. Yeah, I've been told. He drove home through familiar streets, past familiar landmarks, but everything felt slightly different. Lighter, maybe. Like something that had been pressing on his chest for 5 years had finally eased just enough to let him breathe. At home, Riley was already asleep, and the babysitter reported no problems. Logan paid her, locked up, and checked on his daughter. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over her stuffed triceratops, hair everywhere. Logan pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "We did something good today, Bug," he whispered. "I think Evan would have liked it." Riley didn't wake up, but Logan let himself believe she'd heard him anyway. In his own room, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. He thought about the meeting, about Ava's face when the board finally voted yes, about Sarah Chen telling him they didn't blame him, that he'd tried. For 5 years, Logan had believed he was irredeemable, that what happened to Evan had permanently marked him as someone who failed when it mattered most. But maybe that wasn't the whole story. Maybe he'd been doing the best he could in an impossible situation. Maybe the real failure belonged to a system that forced people to choose between their livelihood and their humanity. And maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to start forgiving himself. The thought felt fragile, dangerous, like if he held onto it too tightly, it would shatter. But for the first time in 5 years, Logan let himself sit with it anyway. And eventually, finally, he slept. The email came 3 weeks later at 7 in the morning, while Logan was making Riley's lunch. Subject line, Titan Project, Anniversary Memorial. Your attendance requested. Logan's hand froze over the bread bag. He'd forgotten. Or maybe he'd deliberately not remembered. 5 years ago today, Evan Stone had died on a highway at 3 in the morning, and apparently someone in HR had decided this was worth commemorating. He opened the email with dread pooling in his stomach. In honor of those we've lost, Fortis Engineering invites all staff to a brief memorial service at 10 a.m. in Conference Room A. Light refreshments will be provided. Logan deleted it immediately, then felt guilty and pulled it back from the trash. "Daddy, you're squishing my sandwich." He looked down. His hand was pressed flat against Riley's turkey and cheese, compressing it into a dense, unappetizing disc. "Sorry, Bug." He tried to reshape it, failed, and started over with fresh bread. Riley watched him with the unnerving perceptiveness of a 7-year-old who'd learned to read her father's moods before she could read books. "Are you sad again?" "Just distracted." "That's what you say when you're sad." Logan sighed and crouched down to her level. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that?" "Grandma says I get it from you." "Grandma's generous." He tucked a strand of hair behind Riley's ear. "I'm okay, promise. Just thinking about work stuff." Riley seemed to accept this, which meant Logan was either getting better at lying or she was getting better at pretending to believe him. Neither option felt great. At school drop-off, Riley hugged him extra tight before running to join her friends. Logan watched her go, ponytail bouncing, light-up sneakers flashing with each step. She was so unbothered by the weight he carried. So free. He wanted to keep it that way. The drive to Fortis took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Logan spent it trying to decide if he'd go to the memorial. On one hand, skipping it felt cowardly. On the other hand, sitting through some sanitized corporate remembrance where they'd probably talk about Evan like he was a cautionary tale instead of a person seemed worse than cowardly. It seemed dishonest. He was still debating when he walked into the office and found Ava waiting by his desk. "You got the email," she said. Not a question. "Yeah." "You going?" Logan set his bag down. "I don't know. Are you?" "I have to. They asked me to speak." Her jaw was tight. HR thought it would be meaningful if family participated. "That's manipulative?" "Yeah." Ava crossed her arms. "But I'm doing it anyway, because if I don't, they'll turn Evan into some generic tragedy. And he deserves better than that." Logan understood that. Had spent 5 years wishing he could do something, anything, to honor Evan beyond the crushing guilt that made it hard to breathe some days. "Okay," he said. "I'll go." "You don't have to." "I know." Ava studied him for a moment, then nodded. 10 o'clock. Try not to look like you're attending your own execution. No promises. By 9:45, Conference Room A was already filling up. Logan recognized most of the faces, people who'd worked with Evan, people who'd been at the company long enough to remember, people who were probably just here for the free coffee and donuts HR had promised. He found a seat in the back corner as far from the front as possible. Marcus slid into the chair next to him. Hey, hey, this is weird, right? Marcus kept his voice low. The memorial thing? Very weird. I mean, I get wanting to remember him, but this feels like… Marcus gestured vaguely at the room, at the corporate-branded slideshow cycling on the projector screen, at the HR representative adjusting the microphone. Performative? Logan couldn't disagree. At exactly 10, Jennifer from HR stepped up to the podium. She was young, mid-20s probably, and had definitely not been with the company when Evan died. She launched into a speech about workplace safety and remembering those we've lost and the importance of supporting one another through difficult times. It was fine, professional, completely bloodless. Logan stopped listening halfway through. Then Ava stood up. She walked to the front of the room in a black dress and heels, her expression carefully neutral. When she reached the podium, she didn't look at her notes, just gripped the edges and looked out at the assembled employees. My brother Evan died 5 years ago today, she said. He was 26 years old. He liked terrible action movies and expensive coffee. He was learning to play guitar and was terrible at it. He called me every Sunday to complain about our parents and ask for career advice he never took. Someone in the front row shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the sanitized memorial they'd expected. The night he died, Ava continued, her voice steady, he called me at midnight. He was exhausted. He'd been working 16-hour days for weeks. He told me he wasn't sure he should drive home, that maybe he should just sleep in his car. She paused. And I told him to stop being dramatic, to just push through, that he was almost done. The room was silent. 3 hours later, my parents got a phone call saying Evan had crashed his car into a highway barrier, that he'd died instantly. And I've spent 5 years wishing I could take back that conversation, wishing I'd told him to stay, to rest, that no job was worth his life. Logan's throat was tight. But the thing is, Ava said, it wasn't just my fault, and it wasn't just his. It was a system that told him working himself to death was normal, expected, admirable even. A system that rewarded pushing through exhaustion and punished asking for help. She looked around the room, making eye contact with people in a way that made them squirm. We can't bring Evan back, but we can make sure no one else dies because they were too afraid to say they needed rest. We can build a company that values people over profit, that treats burnout like the crisis it is instead of a cost of doing business. Her voice hardened. And if you're sitting here thinking that's too idealistic or too expensive or too complicated, then you're part of the problem. Jennifer from HR looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. So here's my challenge, Ava finished. Don't just remember Evan today. Don't just feel sad for 5 minutes and then go back to your desks and forget. Actually change something. Speak up when you see someone drowning. Push back when deadlines become more important than health. Make this place better. She stepped back from the podium. That's all I've got. No one clapped. The silence was too heavy for applause. Ava walked back to her seat in the front row, and Jennifer from HR scrambled to close out the memorial with some awkward words about refreshments in the hallway. People filed out quietly, most of them looking uncomfortable, some of them looking thoughtful. Logan waited until the room had mostly cleared, then made his way to the front where Ava stood alone, staring at nothing. That was, he started. Too much? No, it was honest. Ava laughed, but it sounded hollow. Jennifer's probably going to file a complaint with the board. Pretty sure I violated about 6 HR protocols. Worth it. Yeah. She turned to look at him. Yeah, it was. They stood there in the empty conference room, 2 people bound by a grief that was simultaneously shared and completely isolating. You want to get out of here? Logan asked. Desperately. They ended up at the same bar from 3 weeks ago, even though it was barely 11 in the morning. The bartender gave them a look but didn't comment when Ava ordered whiskey, and Logan got coffee because someone had to pick up Riley at 3. I hate those things, Ava said, staring into her glass. Corporate memorials, they sanitize everything, make it palatable. Like Evan was just a statistic instead of a person. You made sure people remembered he was a person. I made sure people were uncomfortable. She took a sip. There's a difference. Logan wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. You said what needed to be said. Did I? Or did I just make myself feel better by unloading 5 years of guilt onto a room full of people who were expecting a nice, neat ceremony they could forget about in an hour? Both can be true. Ava looked at him. You ever wonder if we're doing this for the right reasons? The safety initiative, the policy changes, all of it. Are we actually trying to help people? Or are we just trying to fix ourselves? Logan had thought about this. Late at night when he couldn't sleep, when the weight of everything felt too heavy to carry. The question of whether he was doing this to honor Evan or just to ease his own guilt. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe it doesn't matter. If the end result is the same, if people are safer, if the company is better, does it matter why we're doing it? Philosophically, probably not, but it matters to me. Ava set her glass down. I need to know I'm not just performing grief, that this isn't all some elaborate way to avoid dealing with the fact that my brother is dead, and I'll never get to apologize for telling him to drive that night. You know he wouldn't want you to carry that, right? Do I? Her voice cracked slightly. Because I never got to ask him, never got to have that conversation. He died, and I was left with all this. She gestured helplessly. Everything, and no way to fix it. Logan understood that feeling viscerally, the wanting to apologize to someone who couldn't hear it, the need for absolution from a person who was gone. He called me his hero, Ava said quietly. When we were kids, I was 6 years older and he thought I could do anything, solve any problem, fix any situation. And the one time it really mattered, I told him to get in a car when he was too tired to drive safely. You didn't know. I should have. She looked at Logan with eyes that were bright but not crying. Ava Stone didn't cry. Logan had learned that over the past few weeks. She got angry or she got quiet, but she didn't break. Not in front of people. I was his big sister. I was supposed to protect him. And I was his manager. I was supposed to keep him safe. Logan leaned forward. We can both carry that guilt forever. Let it eat us alive. Or we can try to build something good out of something terrible. It won't bring him back. It won't fix what happened, but maybe it'll mean his death wasn't completely meaningless. Ava was quiet for a long time. Then she drained her whiskey and stood up. Come on, we have work to do. The implementation of the new policies was messier than either of them had anticipated. Richard Dawson fought them on every detail. Budget allocations got delayed, departments pushed back on the mandatory rest periods, claiming it would destroy their project timelines. Employees who'd spent years normalizing burnout suddenly didn't know how to function with actual boundaries. Logan spent most of his days in meetings that went nowhere, answering the same objections over and over, trying to convince people that caring about their own well-being wasn't weakness. It was exhausting. But it was also working, slowly, incrementally. One policy at a time. They started with Logan's department, 12 people managing infrastructure projects with historically brutal schedules. Hard cap at 50 hours per week. Mandatory 2 days off between crunch periods. Anonymous reporting system for safety concerns that actually got taken seriously. The first week, productivity dropped. Everyone was adjusting, figuring out how to work differently. The second week, it started to even out. By the third week, something unexpected happened. People were better at their jobs. Turns out when you weren't operating on 4 hours of sleep and 6 cups of coffee, you made fewer mistakes. You caught problems earlier. You communicated more effectively. The quality of work went up while the stress level went down. Marcus was the first to say it out loud. This is weird, right? He stood in Logan's cubicle with a report in hand. We're actually ahead of schedule. When's the last time that happened? Never, Logan said. Exactly. It's creeping me out. But it wasn't just the productivity. It was the atmosphere. People smiled more. Actually took lunch breaks instead of eating sad desk salads while answering emails. Left at reasonable hours and didn't feel guilty about it. Sarah Chen, who'd been on the verge of quitting 3 months ago, told Logan it was the first time in 5 years she'd felt like a person instead of a resource to be used up. That conversation stayed with Logan, reminded him why this mattered. Of course, not everyone was happy about it. The breaking point came 6 weeks into implementation during a project review meeting where Richard Dawson decided to make his opposition public. This is unsustainable, he announced, gesturing at the quarterly projections on the screen. We're losing competitive advantage. Other firms are moving faster because they're not hamstringing their employees with all these restrictions. Logan, who'd been exhausted before the meeting even started, felt something snap. They're not restrictions, he said. They're protections. Call them whatever you want. The numbers don't lie. You're right, they don't. Logan stood up, which was probably unprofessional, but he was past caring. Our turnover is down 30%. Injury reports are down 40%. Employee satisfaction is up. And yes, our output is slightly lower in the short term. But we're not hemorrhaging talent anymore. We're not losing institutional knowledge every time someone burns out and quits. And we're sure as hell not going to lose anyone else the way we lost Evan Stone. The room went silent. Dawson's face darkened. That's a low blow. It's the truth. And if you can't see that prioritizing human beings is good business in the long run, then you're exactly the kind of leadership this company needs to move past. You're out of line, Reed. Maybe, but I'm not wrong. Ava, who'd been silent up until this point, stood up. Richard, I appreciate your concern about the bottom line, but Logan's right. We're building something sustainable instead of burning through people like they're disposable. If you can't support that, then we have a fundamental disagreement about what this company should be. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Ava's voice was ice. This initiative has board approval. It's happening. You can either work with us or work against us. But if you work against us, I'll make sure everyone knows you valued short-term profits over the lives and well-being of your employees. Dawson looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in Ava's expression made him back down. He grabbed his papers and left the room without another word. When the door slammed behind him, Logan sat down heavily. Well, Marcus said into the silence, that was intense. That was necessary, Ava corrected. She looked at Logan. You okay? Yeah, just tired of fighting the same battle over and over. Welcome to change management. She gathered her things. But for what it's worth, that was a good fight. You didn't back down. Logan wasn't sure if that was a compliment or just an observation. Either way, he felt wrung out. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Logan answered emails, reviewed timelines, tried to focus on work that felt mundane compared to the morning's confrontation. By the time he left to pick up Riley, his head was pounding and his jaw ached from clenching it all day. Riley, in contrast, was in an excellent mood. She'd gotten a gold star on her spelling test and wanted to celebrate with ice cream. Please, she used her most devastating puppy dog eyes. I got 100%. That means I need ice cream. It's basically a rule. Logan, who had no energy left to resist, agreed. They ended up at the ice cream shop near their house. Riley with a towering cone of mint chocolate chip, and Logan with plain vanilla because he'd long since given up on food being interesting. They sat at a sticky table by the window, Riley chattering about her day, while Logan tried to stay present instead of replaying the meeting with Dawson in his head. Daddy, you're not listening. Sorry, Bug, I'm listening now. I said Mason brought a frog to school and it escaped and Mrs. Patterson screamed and climbed on her desk. Logan blinked. A real frog? Yeah, he found it in his backyard. It was so cool. Riley took a massive bite of ice cream. Can we get a frog? No. A turtle? Also no. You never let me have anything fun. I let you have ice cream on a Tuesday. That's fun. Riley considered this. Fair point. They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Normal people were living normal lives. Coming home from normal jobs, having normal problems that didn't involve dead colleagues and corporate battles and guilt that never quite went away. Logan envied them. Daddy? Riley's voice was quieter now. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? I mean like, she struggled to find the words. You work really hard, and sometimes you're sad, and I just wondered if you're happy. Logan's throat tightened. How did you explain to a 7-year-old that happiness wasn't binary? That you could be sad about something that happened years ago and still find joy in mint chocolate chip ice cream and gold stars on spelling tests? I'm happy when I'm with you, he said, which was true. And I'm working on being happy other times too. It's just taking a while. Riley seemed to accept this. Okay, but if you need help being happy, I can tell you jokes. I learned a really good one about a chicken. Hit me. Why did the chicken go to the seance? I don't know. Why? To talk to the other side. Riley dissolved into giggles at her own joke. Logan laughed too, and it felt good. real. Like maybe happiness wasn't some distant thing he had to earn, but something that existed in small moments between the hard ones. They drove home as the sky darkened, Riley singing along to the radio, Logan letting himself exist in this moment instead of the past or the future. At home, he made dinner, supervised homework, read bedtime stories about dragons who were secretly detectives. When Riley finally fell asleep, Logan sat in his kitchen with his laptop open, reviewing the latest implementation reports. The policies were working, slowly but measurably. People were healthier, happier, more productive. It should have felt like enough. But Logan couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something. That all the policy changes in the world couldn't fix the deeper problem. That they'd built a culture where people like Evan felt like they had to say yes, had to push through, had to prove they were worth keeping. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Still awake? Unfortunately. You? Can't sleep. Keep thinking about Dawson, about whether we're actually changing anything or just rearranging deck chairs. Logan understood that completely. You want to talk about it? Not really, but probably should. Coffee tomorrow morning? Before work? Yeah, the usual place. 6:30? I'll be there. Logan set his phone down and stared at the ceiling. 6:30 meant he'd have to be up by 5:30 to get Riley ready and dropped off early at before school care. It meant starting the day exhausted. But Ava needed to talk, and after everything, he wasn't going to leave her hanging. Besides, maybe she wasn't the only one who needed the conversation. At 6:15 the next morning, Logan walked into the coffee shop they'd been frequenting and found Ava already there, looking like she hadn't slept at all. You look terrible, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Right back at you. They ordered coffee, black for both of them because neither had the energy for anything fancy, and sat in tired silence for a moment. I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, Ava started, about not knowing if we're doing this for the right reasons. And I don't think I'll ever know. I don't think there's a version of this where I can separate grief from purpose, from guilt. They're all tangled up together. She wrapped her hands around her mug. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the fact that it matters enough to keep me up at night means I'm doing it for real reasons, even if they're messy ones. Logan nodded slowly. I've been thinking about Evan a lot lately. Not just the accident, but who he was before, what he cared about. And I think... He paused, trying to find the right words. I think he'd want us to do this, even if our reasons aren't perfect, even if we're doing it partly for ourselves. He cared about people, about fairness. And this is fair. You think so? Yeah, I do. Ava was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it held answers. Then she looked up at Logan with an expression he'd never seen before, something vulnerable and uncertain and almost hopeful. Thank you, she said, for not letting me do this alone. Same, Logan said. I don't think I could have done any of this without you. They sat there as the coffee shop filled up around them, the morning rush of people getting caffeinated before facing their days. Neither of them had solutions. Neither of them had figured out how to let go of the guilt they carried. But they weren't carrying it alone anymore. And somehow, that made all the difference. 3 months after the memorial, Logan found himself in Ava's office at 8 p.m. on a Friday, surrounded by takeout containers and spreadsheets that refused to make sense, no matter how many times they rearranged the numbers. This doesn't work, Ava said, shoving her laptop away in frustration. If we expand the pilot program to 3 more departments, we blow the quarterly budget. But if we don't expand, Dawson's going to use the limited scope as evidence it's not scalable. Logan rubbed his eyes. They'd been at this for 6 hours. What if we phase it differently? Roll out the overtime caps first, hold off on the expanded mental health benefits until Q3? Then we're half-assing it. People need both. I know. But half-assing it beats not doing it at all. Ava slumped back in her chair, looking as exhausted as Logan felt. Her hair was falling out of its usual neat bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of coffee could fix. Over the past few months, Logan had watched her pour everything into this initiative. Nights, weekends, the kind of relentless focus that would have impressed him if it didn't worry him so much. When's the last time you took a day off? He asked. I don't know. June? Ava, it's October. I know what month it is. Do you? Because you just tried to schedule a meeting for the 32nd. She blinked at her calendar. Okay, that's fair. But I can't take time off right now, not when we're this close to getting board approval for expansion. You're going to burn out. I'm fine. You're eating dinner in your office at 8 p.m. on a Friday. That's the opposite of fine. Logan leaned forward. You can't build a culture that values rest if you're running yourself into the ground. That's different. How? Ava opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. For a moment, she looked like she might actually admit he was right. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and something in her expression shifted. I need to take this. Logan nodded and stepped out into the hallway, giving her privacy. Through the glass walls, he could see her pacing as she talked, one hand gesturing emphatically. Whatever the conversation was, it wasn't good. He was checking his own phone, a text from the babysitter saying Riley was already asleep, when Ava's door opened. My parents are in town, she said without preamble. They want to have dinner tomorrow. With me. The way she said it made it clear this wasn't a casual family meal. You don't sound excited. I'm not. We haven't exactly been on good terms since I took this job. She leaned against the doorframe. They think I'm obsessing over Evan's death instead of moving on. That coming here was self-destructive. What do you think? I think they might be right, but I'm doing it anyway. She looked at him. You ever do something you know is probably bad for you but can't stop because it's the only thing that makes sense? Logan thought about the 5 years he'd spent drowning in guilt, about the nights he couldn't sleep, about the way he'd built his entire life around avoiding this exact building until Ava forced him to face it. Yeah, he said. I get that. Ava studied him for a moment, then made a decision. Come with me. What? To dinner, tomorrow. Come with me. Logan stared at her. Why would I? Because my parents think I'm here alone, spiraling, fixating on the past. If they meet you, see that there's actually someone working on this with me. Someone who gets it. She stopped. I just don't want to do it alone. It was the vulnerability in that last sentence that got him. Ava Stone, who faced down hostile board members and budget cuts and Richard Dawson's constant undermining without flinching, didn't want to have dinner with her parents alone. Okay, Logan said. What time? The restaurant was the kind of place Logan would never normally go. White tablecloths, prefix menus, wine lists that probably cost more than his rent. He showed up 10 minutes early in the only dress shirt he owned that didn't have a stain on it, feeling completely out of place. Ava was already there, sitting at a corner table with two people who could only be her parents. Her father was tall and silver-haired, the kind of man who wore expensive suits like a second skin. Her mother was smaller, elegant, with Ava's sharp eyes and the same way of holding herself like she was bracing for impact. Logan. Ava stood when she saw him, and there was relief in her eyes. Mom, Dad, this is Logan Reed. He's the project manager I've been working with. Logan, these are my parents, Richard and Catherine Stone. Richard's handshake was firm to the point of aggressive. Catherine's was more reserved, her expression politely neutral in a way that made Logan think she'd already made up her mind about him. They sat. A waiter appeared immediately with menus and water. Logan felt like he was in a play where everyone knew their lines except him. So, Logan, Richard started once they'd ordered. Ava tells us you worked with our son. There it was. Less than 5 minutes in and they were already talking about Evan. Yes, sir. We were on the same team for about 8 months before Logan stopped. Before the accident. And now you're helping Ava with this workplace safety initiative. It wasn't phrased as a question, but Logan answered anyway. Yes. We're trying to make sure what happened to Evan doesn't happen to anyone else. Catherine set down her water glass. That's very noble. But Evan's death was 5 years ago. At some point, you have to accept that some things can't be fixed and move forward. Mom, Ava said quietly, I'm not trying to be cruel, sweetheart. I'm just worried about you. You're so focused on the past that you're not building a future. This is my future. This work matters. Does it? Or is it just a way to avoid dealing with your grief? The question hung in the air like a grenade. Logan watched Ava's jaw tighten, watched her hands clench around her napkin. He'd seen her angry before, at board meetings, at Dawson, at the world in general, but this was different. This was personal. I've dealt with my grief, Ava said, voice controlled, This isn't about avoiding it. It's about making something good come from something terrible. By working yourself to exhaustion? By taking a job at the company where your brother died? Ava, that's not healing. That's what? Ava's voice rose slightly. Self-destructive? Obsessive? I've heard all this before. Richard cleared his throat. We're just concerned. You barely call, you never visit, and when we do see you, all you talk about is this initiative and these policy changes. Where's the daughter who wanted to travel? Who talked about starting her own consulting firm? She grew up, Ava said flatly. She realized some things are more important than traveling. Catherine looked at Logan like this was somehow his fault. And you encourage this? The question caught him off guard. What? This fixation on the past. Do you think it's healthy? Logan glanced at Ava, who was staring at her water glass like she wanted to disappear into it. He could deflect, could give some corporate non-answer that wouldn't make waves, could let Ava fight this battle alone. But that felt like cowardice. I think, Logan said carefully, that your daughter is one of the bravest people I've ever met. She came to a place that represents incredible pain for her, and instead of running from it, she's trying to fix a broken system. That takes courage. And yeah, maybe it's not the healthiest way to grieve, but it's real, it matters, and it's helping people. Catherine's expression didn't soften. But is it helping her? I don't know, Logan admitted, but I do know she's not doing it alone, and I think that counts for something. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, breaking the tension. They ate in uncomfortable silence for a while, the kind where every clink of silverware felt too loud. Finally, Richard spoke. Evan called us the week before he died. Ava's head snapped up. He told us he was exhausted, that the project was killing him. We told him to quit. Richard's voice was steady, but there was pain underneath. We said no job was worth destroying yourself over, and he said he couldn't, that he'd invested too much, that he owed it to his team to see it through. Why are you telling me this? Ava asked quietly. Because you sound exactly like him. And we couldn't save him, but maybe we can save you. Catherine reached across the table, taking Ava's hand. We don't want to lose you too, sweetheart, even if it's just to a job that consumes you until there's nothing left. Logan watched Ava blink rapidly, fighting tears she wouldn't let fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. I'm not going to disappear into this, she said. I'm not Evan. I know my limits. Do you? Richard asked gently. Because from where we're sitting, you look an awful lot like someone who's forgotten how to stop. The rest of the dinner passed in stilted conversation about neutral topics, Catherine's garden, Richard's golf game, safe subjects that didn't require anyone to be vulnerable. When they finally said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Catherine hugged Ava for a long time. Just think about what we said, she whispered. Please. Ava nodded, but didn't promise anything. Logan drove her back to her car at the office, neither of them speaking. When he pulled into the parking lot, Ava made no move to get out. They're not completely wrong, she said finally. About what? About me fixating, using work to avoid dealing with everything. She stared out the windshield. I told you I came here to face the past, but maybe I'm just trading one avoidance strategy for another. Instead of running away, I'm running towards something so hard that I don't have to stop and feel anything. Logan didn't know what to say to that. Couldn't offer reassurance he wasn't sure was true. Is that what you're doing? Ava asked. Running toward this so you don't have to deal with the guilt? Probably, Logan admitted. But I also think, he paused, trying to articulate something he'd been feeling but hadn't named. I think there's a difference between avoidance and purpose. Yeah, maybe we're both using this work to cope, but we're also actually helping people. Those things can be true at the same time. Can they? Or are we just really good at justifying our obsessions? I don't know, Ava. I don't have those answers. She laughed, bitter and tired. That makes two of us. They sat in the parking lot for another 10 minutes, not talking, just existing in the same space. Eventually, Ava got out of the car. Thanks for coming tonight, she said. I know that was uncomfortable, intense, vaguely traumatic. All of the above. She smiled slightly, but I appreciate it anyway. Anytime. Logan watched her walk to her car, watched her sit behind the wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. He wondered if she was going home or back to the office, wondered if she'd take her parents' advice or keep pushing forward until something broke. He wondered the same thing about himself. The following Monday, Logan walked into the office to find Ava waiting by his desk with 2 coffees and an expression that meant she'd made a decision. "We need to talk," she said. That was never a good way to start a conversation. They found an empty conference room. Ava set the coffees down and paced for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about what my parents said, about what you said, about all of it." She stopped pacing. "And I think they're right. I am fixating. I am using this work to avoid dealing with my grief. But here's the thing. I don't know how to stop." "Okay. And I don't think I should. Not completely. Because this work matters, Logan. It's actually changing things. But," she took a breath, "but I think I need to change how I'm doing it. Need to actually practice what we're preaching about boundaries and rest and not burning yourself out." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to implement a rule. For both of us. No working past 7 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency. No weekends in the office unless absolutely necessary. And we take our vacation days. Actually take them, not just let them pile up and expire." Logan raised an eyebrow. "You're proposing we follow our own policies?" "Revolutionary, I know. Ava, you were here until 9 last Friday." "I know, which is why I need someone to hold me accountable, and I'll do the same for you." She looked at him directly. "Deal." Logan thought about Riley, about the bedtime stories he'd missed, about the school events he'd shown up late to because work had swallowed his time. Thought about the fact that he'd been doing exactly what they'd been fighting against, prioritizing work over everything else. "Deal," he said, "but I'm warning you, I'm going to be obnoxious about enforcing this." "Good. That's the point." They shook on it, and something in the gesture felt significant, not just an agreement about work hours, but a commitment to actually taking care of themselves, to modeling the culture they were trying to build. It was harder than either of them expected. The first week, Logan had to physically remove Ava from her office at 7:15 when she insisted she just needed 10 more minutes. The second week, Ava called him at 6:50 p.m. to remind him he was still at his desk and Riley's school had an art show at 7. He'd completely forgotten. He made it to the art show with 5 minutes to spare, found Riley standing in front of her display, a series of paintings about dinosaurs in space, looking slightly sad until she saw him. Then her whole face lit up. "Daddy, you came!" "Of course I came, Bug. Wouldn't miss it." It was a small lie. He'd almost missed it, but he was here now, and that had to count for something. They walked through the gallery together, Riley explaining each piece with the earnest enthusiasm of a 7-year-old artist. Other parents chatted in clusters, their lives seemingly so much simpler than Logan's felt. But maybe everyone had their own complications. Maybe everyone was just pretending they had it all figured out. "That's a good painting," a voice said behind them. Logan turned to find another parent, a woman about his age with a friendly smile. "Thanks. She worked really hard on it. I'm Jennifer, by the way. My son Mason is in Riley's class." "Oh, the paste-eating kid," Jennifer laughed. "That's the one. He's moved on to crayons now. We're making progress." They talked for a few minutes about school and art projects and the universal struggles of single parenting. It was normal, easy. The kind of conversation Logan hadn't had in months because he'd been so consumed by work that he'd forgotten how to be a regular person. When they finally left, Riley held his hand the whole way to the car. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Some kids' parents didn't show up, and they looked really sad." Logan's chest tightened. "I'll always show up for you, Bug. I promise." It was a promise he intended to keep. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Logan and Ava held each other accountable, forcing each other to leave at reasonable hours, to take lunch breaks, to actually disconnect on weekends. It felt strange at first, almost wrong, like they were slacking off. But gradually, it started to feel normal, and the work didn't suffer. If anything, they were both sharper, more focused, better able to handle the constant pushback from people like Dawson, who still thought treating employees like humans was a radical concept. The initiative was expanding, slowly, carefully, but genuinely expanding. 2 more departments had adopted the new policies. Injury reports were down across the board. Turnover had dropped for the 3rd consecutive quarter. The numbers didn't lie. But it was the stories that mattered most to Logan. The engineer who told him she'd actually slept through the night for the first time in years. The project manager who made it to his kid's soccer game. The designer who'd been on the verge of quitting but decided to stay because finally, the company seemed to give a damn. Those moments made the fights worth it. Made the late nights and hostile meetings, and Richard Dawson's constant undermining feel bearable. One afternoon in November, Logan was working at his desk when Ava appeared with an unusual expression, something between nervous and determined. "I did something," she said. "Should I be worried?" "Maybe. I nominated you for the Engineering Excellence Award." Logan blinked. "You what?" "The award for outstanding contribution to workplace culture. It's a big deal. Comes with a bonus and recognition at the annual gala and—" She waved her hand. "All that corporate stuff. But you deserve it. You've been the driving force behind these changes. Ava, you've been leading this from the beginning. I've been the loud one. You've been the one doing the actual work. Talking to people, gathering data, making sure this wasn't just talk." She crossed her arms. "You earned this." Logan didn't know what to say. Recognition had never been the point. He'd been doing this to fix something broken, to honor Evan's memory, to maybe start forgiving himself. The idea that anyone thought he deserved an award for it felt wrong. "I don't want an award for this," he said. "Too bad. I already submitted the nomination, and between you and me, you're going to win." "Ava..." "Logan." Her voice softened. "Let yourself have this. You've spent 5 years punishing yourself for something that wasn't entirely your fault. Let yourself be recognized for something good." He wanted to argue, wanted to explain that recognition felt like acceptance, and accepting praise for fixing something he'd helped break felt like a betrayal of Evan's memory. But maybe that was the grief talking. Maybe he was allowed to feel guilty about the past and proud of the present simultaneously. Maybe both things could be true. "Okay," he said finally, "but if I win, you're coming to the gala with me. I'm not suffering through a corporate awards ceremony alone." "Deal." 2 weeks later, Logan got the email. He'd won. The gala was in 3 weeks, black tie, at some hotel downtown that probably charged $50 for a glass of water. Logan didn't own a tuxedo, didn't know how to tie a bow tie, hadn't been to a formal event since his wedding, which had ended in divorce before the marriage was a year old. He was dreading it. Riley, on the other hand, thought it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened. "You're going to be on a stage?" she asked, bouncing in her seat at dinner. "Like a movie star?" "Not exactly, Bug. It's just a work thing. But you're getting an award. That means you're famous now." "That's definitely not what it means." But Riley was undeterred. She insisted on helping him pick out a tuxedo, which mostly meant pointing at the shiniest options while Logan tried to find something that didn't make him look like he was playing dress-up. They settled on something simple. Black, classic, hopefully not too embarrassing. The sales associate taught Logan how to tie a bow tie using a YouTube video, and he practiced until his fingers remembered the movements. The night of the gala, Logan dropped Riley off at Marcus's house. Marcus's wife had volunteered to watch her, along with their own kids, and drove downtown with his stomach in knots. Ava was waiting outside the hotel in a dark blue dress that looked expensive and elegant and completely unlike the business attire Logan was used to seeing her in. For a moment, he forgot how to form words. "You clean up okay?" she said with a slight smile. "You too. I mean, you look..." Logan stopped before he could embarrass himself further. "Should we go in?" The ballroom was massive, filled with round tables and chandeliers and people in formal wear who all seemed to know each other. Logan felt completely out of place until Ava linked her arm through his. "Relax," she murmured. "It's just a bunch of engineering nerds in fancy clothes." That helped, slightly. They found their table, mercifully far from Richard Dawson, and sat through dinner and speeches and all the corporate pageantry that came with these events. When they finally got to the awards portion, Logan's palms were sweating. His category was third. When they called his name, the applause seemed distant, like it was happening to someone else. He walked to the stage on autopilot, accepted the plaque from someone whose name he immediately forgot, and stood at the microphone with absolutely no idea what to say. He looked out at the audience, found Ava at their table, watching him with an expression that was proud and sad and understanding all at once. And suddenly, he knew what to say. 5 years ago, Logan started, his voice steadier than he felt. A colleague of mine died. His name was Evan Stone, and he was a good person who cared about his work and his team. He died because we built a culture that valued productivity over people, that treated exhaustion as dedication and burnout as weakness. The room was silent. I spent 5 years carrying guilt for that, wishing I'd done more, said more, fought harder, and then someone gave me a second chance, a chance to take that guilt and turn it into something useful, to build a culture where people like Evan don't have to choose between their jobs and their well-being. He held up the plaque. This award isn't mine. It belongs to every person who's ever felt like they had to say yes when they needed to say no. Every person who pushed through exhaustion because they thought that's what being professional meant. Every person we lost along the way because we didn't protect them the way we should have. Logan looked directly at Ava. So I accept this on behalf of Evan Stone, and I promise to keep fighting to make sure his death wasn't meaningless. He walked off the stage to applause that felt more real this time, more honest. When he got back to the table, Ava was crying, actually crying, tears running down her face that she didn't bother to hide. Her voice broke. Thank you. Logan sat down beside her and without thinking put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, and they sat like that through the rest of the ceremony. Two people who'd been carrying the same weight finally learning to share it. Later, after the gala ended and they were walking to the parking lot, Ava stopped. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay. I came to Fortis because I wanted to fix what happened to Evan, but I stayed because of you. She looked at him directly. You made this bearable, made me feel less alone. And I think, she paused. I think somewhere along the way this stopped being just about Evan. It became about us too, about building something good together. Logan's heart was pounding. Ava, I'm not saying this to make things weird. I just needed you to know that you matter, that this, she gestured between them. Whatever this is, it matters. For 5 years, Logan had told himself he didn't deserve good things, that happiness was something other people got to have. But standing in a parking lot at midnight in a rented tuxedo, looking at a woman who understood his grief because she carried the same kind, he realized something. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you earned. Maybe it was something you chose. Every day. In small moments and big ones. In the decision to keep showing up even when it hurt. In the courage to let someone else see your broken parts and trust they wouldn't use them against you. It matters to me too, Logan said quietly. You matter to me. Ava smiled, and it was the first time Logan had seen her look genuinely happy. They stood there for a moment longer, neither quite ready to leave, both knowing something had shifted between them that couldn't be undone. And for the first time in 5 years, that didn't scare Logan. It felt like hope. The morning after this gala, Logan woke up to Riley jumping on his bed at 6:30, like always. Except this time he didn't mind. He felt lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying a weight for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Daddy, you're smiling, Riley observed, bouncing hard enough to make the mattress creak. You never smile when I wake you up. Maybe I'm in a good mood. Because of the award? Something like that. Riley grinned. I told everyone at school my dad is famous now. Mason was super jealous. Logan pulled her into a hug, feeling her giggle against his chest. I'm not famous, Bug. I'm just a guy who's trying to do the right thing. That's what famous people say. Over breakfast, scrambled eggs that were slightly burned because Logan was distracted, his phone buzzed with a text from Ava. Coffee later? Need to talk about something. His stomach did a complicated flip. After last night's parking lot conversation, things between them had shifted into territory neither of them had mapped out. He texted back a quick, yeah, usual place at 10, and tried not to overthink it. After dropping Riley at school, Logan drove to the coffee shop they'd claimed as their unofficial headquarters for conversations too honest for the office. Ava was already there, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual work clothes. It was Saturday. They weren't supposed to be thinking about work, but some conversations couldn't wait for Monday. Hey, she said when he slid into the seat across from her. Hey. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, both holding coffee cups like shields. So, Ava started, then stopped. Started again. Last night I said some things. You did, and I meant them, but I've been thinking, and I need to be honest about something else too. She took a breath. I don't know how to do this. She gestured vaguely between them. Whatever this is becoming, I've spent 5 years avoiding anything that felt like moving on because moving on felt like forgetting Evan. And being with you, it's the first time I felt like those things aren't mutually exclusive. Logan's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. I don't know how to do this either. I've got a 7-year-old who comes first, always. I've got guilt that probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And I've never been great at relationships even when my life wasn't a mess. So we're both disasters. Pretty much. Ava smiled slightly. Then maybe we can be disasters together, slowly, without expectations or timelines or any of that pressure. I can do slow, Logan said. Slow is good. Yeah? Yeah. They sat there grinning at each other like idiots until the barista gave them a weird look. The next few months were an exercise in figuring out what slow actually meant. They didn't tell anyone at work, not because it was a secret, but because they both needed to figure out what they were doing before facing everyone else's opinions about it. They had coffee dates that sometimes turned into dinners. They texted stupid jokes in the middle of the day. They learned each other's rhythms in a way that felt easy despite all the complicated history between them. Riley met Ava 3 weeks later, completely by accident. Logan had promised to take Riley to the Science Museum, and Ava had mentioned she was going to the same place to see an engineering exhibit. They ran into each other by the dinosaur skeletons, and before Logan could figure out how to explain who Ava was, Riley had already launched into an enthusiastic explanation of why velociraptors were superior to T-Rexes. Ava listened with genuine interest, asked smart questions, and didn't talk down to her. By the time they left 2 hours later, Riley had decided Ava was pretty cool for a grown-up. Your daughter is hilarious, Ava said later when Riley was out of earshot, examining a display about black holes. She's something, Logan agreed. She liked you, by the way, in case that wasn't obvious. The feeling's mutual. That night, after putting Riley to bed, Logan sat in his kitchen and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that maybe he could have more than just survival. That maybe he deserved happiness alongside the guilt. That maybe the two could coexist without one canceling out the other. At work, the initiative continued expanding. By February, 6 departments had adopted the new policies. The data was undeniable. Better retention, fewer injuries, higher productivity, improved morale. Even Richard Dawson had stopped openly opposing them, though Logan suspected that had more to do with the board's support than any actual change of heart. But the real victory came in small moments. The engineer who told Logan she'd started painting again because she finally had evenings free. The project manager who made it to his daughter's school play. The designer who'd been on the verge of a breakdown and was now actually enjoying her work again. Those were the wins that mattered. One afternoon in March, Logan was in a meeting with Ava and the implementation team when his phone rang. Riley's school. His stomach dropped. They only called during the day if something was wrong. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the hallway. Mr. Reed? The school nurse's voice was calm, which helped. Riley's fine, but she took a fall on the playground, possible sprained wrist. We think you should take her to get it checked out. 20 minutes later, Logan was at the school, finding Riley in the nurse's office with an ice pack on her wrist and tears drying on her cheeks. Hey, Bug, you okay? I fell off the monkey bars, she said, voice small. It really hurts, Daddy. Logan's chest ached. I know. We're going to get you fixed up, okay? At the urgent care clinic, they confirmed it was just a sprain. No break, no serious damage, just a brace for a couple weeks and instructions to ice it regularly. Riley was remarkably brave through the whole thing, only crying a little when the doctor moved her wrist to test the range of motion. Can I still do art class? She asked on the drive home. We'll figure it out. Maybe you can paint with your other hand. That's going to look terrible. Then it'll be abstract art, very sophisticated. Riley giggled despite the pain, and Logan felt the familiar rush of love mixed with terror that came with being a parent. The knowledge that he couldn't protect her from everything, that falls and hurt and disappointment were part of life, but he could be there to help her through it. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Is Riley okay? Marcus said you left in a hurry. Sprained wrist. She's fine. Doctor says 2 weeks in a brace. Poor kid. Let me know if you need anything. That night, after Riley was settled on the couch with her favorite movie and a bowl of ice cream, doctor's orders, Logan had told her, which was only a small lie, his doorbell rang. Ava stood on his porch with a bag of takeout and a stuffed triceratops wearing a tiny arm sling. "I come bearing gifts," she said. Riley's face lit up when she saw the dinosaur. "He's hurt like me." "Exactly. I figured you two could recover together." Logan watched Ava sit with Riley, helping her name the dinosaur. They settled on Dr. Rex, and explaining that even dinosaurs needed time to heal. Something warm settled in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name but didn't want to let go of. After Riley fell asleep on the couch, Logan carried her to bed while Ava cleaned up the takeout containers. "You didn't have to do this," he said when he came back to the kitchen. "I wanted to. Besides, I've gotten kind of attached to your kid. She's gotten attached to you too. Fair warning, she's going to want you around more now." Ava smiled. "I can live with that." They stood in Logan's small kitchen, and it felt natural in a way that should have been terrifying given how complicated everything was. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the complicated parts were what made it real. "Thank you," Logan said, "for showing up, for caring about Riley, for all of it." "You don't have to thank me for caring. That's not something I can help." They were standing close now, close enough that Logan could see the flecks of gold in Ava's dark eyes. Close enough that when she leaned in, he met her halfway. The kiss was soft, careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. When they pulled apart, Ava was smiling. "So that happened," she said. "Yeah." "Thoughts?" "Good. That was good." "Very articulate." Logan laughed. "Give me a break. I'm out of practice." "Well, you've got time to improve." Spring turned to summer. The initiative became just part of how Fortis operated instead of something they had to fight for every day. Richard Dawson retired, voluntarily, though Ava's pointed comments at board meetings about toxic leadership probably helped speed the decision. The company hired a new CFO who actually believed that treating people well was good business. Riley's wrist healed. She went back to climbing everything in sight, giving Logan approximately 1,000 new reasons to worry. But she was happy, healthy, and had taken to asking when Miss Ava was coming over with an enthusiasm that was both endearing and slightly embarrassing. In June, Ava's parents came to visit again. This time, dinner was at Logan's house, nowhere fancy, just burgers on the grill and Riley showing off her latest dinosaur drawings. Catherine and Richard were different this time, warmer, like they'd finally accepted that Ava was okay, that she'd found a way to honor Evan's memory without destroying herself in the process. "You're good for her," Catherine told Logan while they were cleaning up in the kitchen. "She's lighter now, more herself." "She's good for me too," Logan said honestly. Richard cornered him later on the back porch while Ava and Riley were examining something in the yard. A caterpillar, probably, given Riley's excitement. "I owe you an apology," Richard said. "At that first dinner, I blamed you for encouraging Ava's fixation on the past. I was wrong. You helped her find a way forward." "We helped each other," Logan said. "That's how it works." Richard nodded, then extended his hand. "Take care of my daughter." "I intend to." They shook on it, and Logan felt like he'd passed some kind of test he hadn't known he was taking. One evening in late July, Logan and Ava sat on his back porch after Riley had gone to bed, watching fireflies drift across the yard. They'd been together, officially, explicitly together, for 6 months. It felt both longer and shorter than that. Longer because of everything they'd been through to get here. Shorter because Logan still sometimes woke up surprised that this was his life now. "I've been thinking," Ava said, her head resting on Logan's shoulder, "about what we've built at Fortis, about Evan." "Yeah?" "I think we did it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough that things are genuinely different. People are safer, happier, and I think—" Her voice caught slightly. "I think Evan would have liked what we created." Logan squeezed her hand. "I think so too. But I've also been thinking about what comes next. For me, I mean." She sat up to look at him. "I got a job offer, CEO position at a tech startup in Boston. They want someone to help them build a healthy workplace culture from the ground up." Logan's stomach dropped. "Boston. I know, it's far, and I don't want to leave you and Riley, but it's also—" She paused. "It's a chance to take what we learned and apply it somewhere new, to prove this wasn't just a fluke." "What do you want to do?" "I want to take the job, but I also want this." She gestured between them. "And I don't know how to have both." Logan was quiet for a moment, processing. Boston was a 6-hour drive, too far for casual visits, but also not impossible. People made long-distance work all the time, didn't they? What if, he said slowly, we tried to make both work? You take the job. I stay here with Riley, and we figure out the distance thing. Visits on weekends, video calls during the week. It'll be hard, but he looked at her. I don't want you to give up an opportunity because of me. And I don't think that's what we're supposed to be to each other. We're supposed to help each other grow, not hold each other back. Ava's eyes were bright. You'd be okay with that? I'd be sad. I'd miss you constantly. But yeah, I'd be okay with it. He took her hand. Because I believe in what you're building, and I believe in us enough to think we can handle a few 100 miles. She kissed him then, fierce and grateful and a little desperate. When they broke apart, she was crying. I love you, she said. I should have said that before, but I was scared, but I do. I love you. Logan felt something in his chest crack open, something that had been sealed shut for 5 years. I love you too, even though you're moving to Boston and breaking my heart a little. Only a little? Okay, a lot, but I'll survive. They sat there holding each other as the fireflies danced and the summer night wrapped around them. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real, and it was theirs, and that was enough. Ava left for Boston in August. The goodbye at the airport was harder than Logan expected, Riley crying openly and making Ava promise to visit soon. Logan held it together until Riley fell asleep in the car on the way home, and then he pulled over and let himself cry too. Not because he was losing Ava, he wasn't, not really, but because change was hard even when it was the right thing. But they made it work. Ava flew back once a month. Logan and Riley visited Boston twice, staying in Ava's tiny apartment and exploring the city. They video called most nights, Riley showing Ava her latest drawings while Logan caught her up on the ongoing battles at Fortis. The distance was hard, but it was also manageable. And knowing they were both pursuing things that mattered made the separation feel purposeful instead of pointless. At work, Logan took on more responsibility, leading the expansion of the initiative into other divisions. He trained new managers on the policies, fought the same fights with different executives, and slowly, steadily changed the culture from the inside out. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One September afternoon, almost exactly 6 years after Evan's death, Logan found himself standing in a conference room with Sarah Chen and Marcus and a dozen other managers who'd been part of the original pilot program. We're presenting to the board next week, Logan said. Full company-wide implementation. No more pilots, no more tests. Just a commitment that this is how we operate now. You think they'll approve it? Sarah asked. They'd better. We've got 6 years of data proving it works. The board meeting was intense, but shorter than Logan expected. They'd laid the groundwork too well, built too strong a case. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Every department, every project, every employee. The policies that had started as Logan and Ava's desperate attempt to make meaning out of tragedy were now standard operating procedure. Logan called Ava as soon as the meeting ended. We did it, he said. Full approval, company-wide. Logan, that's incredible. He could hear the smile in her voice. Evan would be so proud. Yeah, I think he would. That night, Logan took Riley to dinner at her favorite restaurant, the one with the dinosaur decorations and terrible pizza that she loved. Over pepperoni that was slightly burned and soda that was mostly ice, he tried to explain what the day had meant. You know how sometimes people make mistakes? He started. Riley nodded, chewing thoughtfully. Well, a long time ago, I made a mistake at work. I let someone work too hard and they got hurt, and for a really long time I felt terrible about it. The person who died, Riley said, surprising him. Logan blinked. How did you... I heard you talking to Miss Ava once. You said his name was Evan. She set down her pizza. Is that why you're always sad sometimes? Logan's throat was tight. Yeah, Bug, that's part of it. But you fixed it, right? You made new rules so other people don't get hurt? We tried to. Me and Miss Ava and a lot of other people. Riley thought about this. Then maybe you don't have to be sad anymore. Because you fixed the mistake. If only it were that simple. But maybe, in a way, it was. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about earning it or deserving it. Maybe it was about deciding you'd done enough, learned enough, changed enough. Maybe it was about looking at what you'd built from the wreckage and recognizing it as something good. "You're pretty wise for 8 years old," Logan said. "I'm still 7. "You're pretty wise for 7 years old." Riley grinned and went back to her pizza, the conversation already forgotten. But Logan sat with it, turning her words over in his mind. Maybe you don't have to be sad anymore. He thought about Evan, not the accident, not the guilt, but the person. The guy who'd made terrible jokes during meetings, who'd been genuinely excited about boring engineering problems, who'd called Ava every Sunday and complained about their parents, but never actually meant it. Evan had been real, complicated, human, not a saint to be mourned, but a person to be remembered. And maybe that was the lesson. Not that tragedy could be fixed or guilt could be erased, but that life kept moving forward whether you were ready or not. You could spend it drowning in what you'd lost, or you could build something from the pieces. You could honor the dead by actually living. In November, Ava came home for Thanksgiving. She'd been in Boston for 3 months, and the distance had been harder than either of them wanted to admit. But when she walked through Logan's door and Riley launched herself at her with a shriek of excitement, it felt right. Not easy, not perfect, but right. They cooked dinner together, turkey that was slightly dry, stuffing that was slightly burned, cranberry sauce from a can because none of them were fancy enough for homemade. Riley insisted on setting the table with her nice plastic plates, and they all sat down to the most chaotic, imperfect, wonderful meal Logan had eaten in years. "What are you thankful for?" Riley asked, because apparently they were doing that. "Dinosaurs," she answered her own question, "and that Daddy's not sad all the time anymore. And Miss Ava." Logan's chest was tight. "I'm thankful for you, Bug. And for second chances, and for people who show up even when it's hard." He looked at Ava when he said that last part. "I'm thankful for both of you," Ava said, "for Riley's dinosaur expertise and your dad's terrible cooking and—" her voice caught. "And for the fact that we figured out how to turn pain into purpose." They finished dinner and settled on the couch to watch a movie, Riley wedged between them, already half asleep. Logan looked at this makeshift family they'd built from grief and guilt and the determination to do better, and thought maybe this was what healing looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something else. Something good enough to make the pain bearable. Later, after Riley was in bed and they were cleaning up the kitchen, Ava turned to him. "I got another offer," she said. Logan's stomach sank. "Another job?" "No, the Boston company wants to open a satellite office. Here, in this city." She set down the dish she was washing. "They asked if I'd be willing to run both, split my time, spend half the month here, half there." I know it's still not perfect, but it's better than 6 hours away. And I miss you. I miss Riley. I miss this." She gestured at the kitchen, at the life they'd been building. "If you're okay with it, I want to come home." Logan pulled her into a hug, and she pressed her face into his shoulder. "I'm more than okay with it." "Yeah?" "Yeah." 6 months later, Ava moved back. Not into Logan's house. They weren't ready for that yet, and Riley needed stability before they made that kind of change. But she got an apartment 10 minutes away, close enough for weeknight dinners and weekend adventures, and all the small moments that made up a life. They still had hard days, still fought sometimes about stupid things, still carried the weight of Evan's death in ways that probably would never fully go away. But they carried it together, and that made all the difference. Riley started 3rd grade. Logan got promoted to senior project manager. Ava's satellite office grew until it was bigger than the Boston headquarters. The initiative at Fortis became something other companies started studying, trying to replicate. Logan and Ava became minor celebrities in engineering circles, speaking at conferences about workplace culture and the real cost of burnout. They never forgot why they'd started. Never let the work become just work instead of something personal and vital. Every policy they wrote, every training they conducted, every conversation they had with managers who thought caring about employees was weak, it was all in service of making sure no one else had to get that phone call at 3 in the morning. One spring evening, 7 years after Evan's death and 2 years after Ava had moved back, Logan found himself standing in a cemetery he'd avoided for too long. Ava stood beside him, holding his hand, both of them looking at a headstone that read Evan Stone, beloved son and brother. "I should have come here before," Logan said. "You're here now." I didn't know what to say to him. Do you now? Logan thought about it. About the years of guilt and grief and slowly learning to live again. About Riley and Ava and the family they'd built from the wreckage. About the hundreds of people whose lives were different because they'd refused to let Evan's death be meaningless. Yeah, he said. I think I do. He crouched down by the headstone, Ava's hand still in his. Hey, Evan, I don't know if you can hear this, but I'm sorry. For not protecting you, for not fighting harder, for every decision that put you in that car that night. His voice was steady. But I also want you to know that we didn't let it end there. Your sister, she's amazing, by the way, in case you didn't know. She came back and she fought, and she made sure your death changed things. We both did. Logan paused, gathering his thoughts. I know that doesn't bring you back. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I hope... His voice broke slightly. I hope wherever you are, you're proud of what we built. Because we built it for you, and for everyone else who deserves to come home safe at the end of the day. Ava knelt beside him, her own tears falling freely now. I miss you, she said to her brother's grave, every day. But I'm okay now. We both are. And I think you'd like who I've become, who we've all become. They stayed there for a while, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Eventually they stood, brushed off their knees, and walked back to the car hand in hand. Thank you, Ava said, for coming here with me. Always. That night, after dropping Ava at her apartment with a kiss that promised tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, Logan went home to find Riley still awake, reading in bed with a flashlight. Bug, it's past your bedtime. I know, but this book is really good. She looked up at him. Where'd you go? I went to visit someone. Someone I should have visited a long time ago. The person who died? Yeah. Riley set down her book. Did it help? Logan sat on the edge of her bed, this kid who'd grown up watching him grieve and somehow turned out okay anyway. This kid who'd taught him that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about learning to carry the weight differently. Yeah, he said. It did. Good. Riley yawned. Can Miss Ava come over for breakfast tomorrow? I'll ask her. Okay. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Bug. Logan turned off her light and stood in the doorway, watching her settle into sleep. His life wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and still carried the shadow of loss. But it was also full of love and second chances and the hard-won knowledge that you could survive the worst thing you'd ever done and still build something good. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from that first terrible phone call to the empty office where Ava had finally cornered him, to the board meetings and late-night conversations and slowly learning to forgive himself. He thought about Evan, about the person he'd been and the legacy he'd left behind. And he realized something that felt true in a way few things did. The people we lose don't stay lost if we let them change us for the better. They live on in the choices we make, in the lives we touch, in the determination to make sure their deaths meant something. Evan Stone had died 7 years ago, but he'd also sparked a movement that had saved countless others, had brought together two people who'd been drowning in guilt and given them a reason to keep swimming, had created a legacy of care and purpose that would outlive all of them. That wasn't nothing, that was everything. Logan closed Riley's door quietly and walked to his own room. Tomorrow, Ava would come over for breakfast. They'd make pancakes that would probably burn. Riley would chatter about her latest dinosaur obsession. They'd go to the park or the museum or nowhere at all. They'd live their small, imperfect, beautiful life. And somewhere, maybe, Evan would be watching, would see what they'd built from the wreckage of that terrible night, would see that his life had mattered, that his death hadn't been the end of the story, but the beginning of something new. Logan hoped so. He really hoped so. Because in the end, that was what this had all been about. Not fixing the past. You couldn't do that. Not erasing guilt. That stayed with you whether you wanted it to or not, but finding a way to live forward, to take the broken pieces and build something worth having, to honor the dead by actually living. And Logan Reed, single father, engineer, man who'd spent 5 years convinced he was irredeemable, had finally learned how to do that. It had taken him a long time, had cost him more than he'd wanted to pay. But standing in his small house with his sleeping daughter down the hall and the woman he loved just 10 minutes away, with a career built on making sure no one else had to lose someone the way he'd lost Evan, Logan could honestly say it had been worth it. Every painful step, every hard conversation, every moment he'd wanted to give up but kept going anyway. All of it had led him here, to this life he'd never expected but couldn't imagine living without. And maybe that was the real lesson. Not that tragedy makes us stronger, that's a lie people tell to make pain more bearable, but that we're capable of more than we think, that we can survive the unsurvivable and still find reasons to smile, that love and purpose and the stubborn refusal to let the worst thing that ever happened define us can carry us through almost anything. Logan turned off his light and climbed into bed, exhausted but content. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be more fights at work, more moments of grief, more complicated conversations about how to balance love and career and the ghosts that never quite left. But he'd face them. Not alone. Not anymore. And that made all the difference.